personality in the world. So I threw all that out there just to say, it just kind of got me thinking about a lot of things. What do you think about all that?
Yeah, I mean, this is the eternal struggle, entrepreneurial struggle, right?
Yeah.
And I see people kind of vacillate between two extremes. And on one extreme, I see people who are so concerned about their legacy. And people ask me that all the time. Like, what do you want your legacy to be? What's your legacy? What's your legacy? Because they really want to make a massive, they're very impact centric. And they want to make a massive impact on the world. And they essentially want to not necessarily live forever, but be remembered forever, right? They want to be important, but not just like as somebody who made a lot of money, but somebody who made a difference. And so when they say legacy, they're like, I just want my legacy to live on. I want to be remembered as somebody who.
Hey, everybody. Ryan Deiss and Roland Frazier here with another episode of the Business Lunch Podcast. Ryan, how you doing today?
Spectacularly well. And yourself?
I am doing quite well as well, despite the fact that above my head, although you can't see it right now, is an atmospheric river, apparently on the precipice of dumping gallons and gallons and gallons of water on top of me.
Yeah, for those who are not familiar, Roland lives in Southern California. We'll give his address at the end of the show if you just want to drop by and say hi. He loves that kind of thing.
People have in the past, that's for sure.
Yeah, just knock, and immediately just give him a big hug. His favorite thing in the world. And then as you hug him, if he starts to pull away, that's a sign to pull in tighter, and then go, you smell so good. That's his favorite thing. So again, address coming at the end of the show. That's kind of a bonus. But no, you live in
probably in the show notes.
Let's just say in the show notes. You live in Southern California, where it generally never rains. It's raining a lot. Are you worried about flooding? Are y'all going to be okay? Seriously?
We are good. We are good. The news always really overstates things. So we're good. It is wet outside. I can confirm.
It is wet. Well, it's either wildfires or rain. One of the two is going to get you. So
yes. So or earthquakes, right? Don't forget those. So I came across something that I thought was interesting to talk about. There was kind of a guy that I followed when I was younger. He was just larger than life. A guy named Teddy Forstmann, and he had, I think it was Forstmann Little was his private equity firm, and he started with small deals, kind of came from nothing. He had a brother that he was always competitive with, but he basically built up a fund, acquired and became the CEO of Gulfstream Jets, turned it around, got a going away present, a G5 as a going away present. He flew everywhere. He had dalliances with Princess Di and Elizabeth Hurley. He, dated models.
Like a good dalliance.
I think it was IMG agency. Yeah. He bought the IMG agency and was CEO of that, and lots and lots of other things. I think he bought. I think that he bought the Gulfstream company for like $880 million and sold it for $3.5 billion. I mean, crazy numbers. And so this is a guy that I kind of looked up to as a model for who I wanted to be when I was younger and kind of coming up and thinking, gosh, those private equity guys, that seems like a pretty good deal. Anyway, he ultimately got brain cancer later in his life, but still in his prime, and it killed him relatively quickly. And he had gone through multiple ghostwriters to write a biography about him. And so this was an article that was in Vanity Fair that was written by the last ghostwriter that he hired, whose name was Rich Cohen. And basically, it kind of goes through what it was like as Cohen was with him. And he kind of found that despite he's got a $40 million house that overlooks the Central Park, and he's got a $30-some million house in the Hamptons and his G5 and flies all over the world and all that, he's unmarried. He has no kids, although he did adopt two. He's a very difficult guy, but he's also a very generous guy. And so I like it for a couple things. One is, so here are the three things I got out of it. One is the marginal utility of wealth at some point. When do you have enough that no matter how much more you have, it's really not going to make any difference. That's thing one. Thing two is the work-life balance, which we've talked about a few times. Here's a guy that was a passionate, amazing business person, but really skewed so far towards that he didn't have time for a personal life. He had kind of a playboy lifestyle, but not like deep, meaningful relationships. And then this dichotomy between that, despite being a very difficult person and in several situations I read about, kind of a jerk, he would also, like, he'd argue with the waiter, but then he'd leave him $100 tip under the plate. Just one of those kinds of people. So I thought it would be interesting just to talk about him. He's gone now. It also was interesting how if you don't have your health, you have nothing, because he had everything, and then he got a brain tumor and he was gone relatively quickly. And then after that, the legacy that he left, while he had adopted 2 kids, I don't know what happened to them because it didn't say, but his houses were all sold off. His company was closed down, and it was almost like he ceased to exist, like he had never existed, despite being this big personality in the world. So I threw all that out there just to say, it just kind of got me thinking about a lot of things. What do you think about all that?
Yeah, I mean, this is the eternal struggle, entrepreneurial struggle, right?
Yeah.
And I see people kind of vacillate between 2 extremes. And on one extreme, I see people who are so concerned about their legacy. And people ask me that all the time. Like, what do you want your legacy to be? What's your legacy? What's your legacy? Because they really want to make a massive, they're very impact centric. And they want to make a massive impact on the world. And they essentially want to not necessarily live forever, but be remembered forever, right? They want to be important, but not just like as somebody who made a lot of money, but somebody who made a difference. And so when they say legacy, they're like, I just want my legacy to live on. I want to be remembered as somebody who cared
What do you
deeply.
think of that?
I think that I will be forgotten within a generation by basically everybody except maybe. Yeah, so I don't think that extreme does very little to me. But then it can kind of make us feel a little bit like nihilistic. Well, then none of it really matters. And then everything seems to shift over. And we know people like this as well, who we'll eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. And so it's like, let's just maximize everything that we can have, in this moment, achieve full maximum experience in this time, because, nothing in the future matters. And I've seen that, depending on what they mean by eat, drink, and be merry, being very destructive, but also leading to kind of this life of, well, why bother having, if I'm not going to be remembered, why bother getting married? Why bother having kids? And look, I'm not getting anybody who chooses to be single, married couples who choose not to have kids. I'm not making a judgment on that decision, but those seem to be the 2 extremes. And I just think they're both so fatally flawed.
Also,
personally,
both totally ego driven, I think. One is stamping your feet and pouting because you're not going to be remembered, because you realize that most people will not be. And 2, feeling that you've got to have people know you who don't know you now, years from now. Whereas I think the middle ground of you have an opportunity to have an impact around you every single day. And when you cease to exist, your impact will diminish over time, because that's just how things are. And that's okay. So don't be the egomaniac. Do the good things now. And maybe you'll accidentally be remembered. But I think, like, the plot to have a will, I get, let me distribute my assets to my heirs when I'm dead. Let me give it to charity and do good things. But the idea of, I want future generations to revere me, to me just seems so ego-based. And then the little kid reaction of, I'm not going to be remembered, so screw you. I'm going to hold my breath and I'm going to, do all the things I'm not supposed to do, seems also crazy ego, crazy selfish. So how do you balance that out?
I think so. Jason Cohen, who he started WP Engine, which is a WordPress hosting solution.
Didn't we pay rent to them in London for like a long time or something?
No, that was a totally different company. But yeah, no, this is a Austin-based company, hosting company. They and Jason has a really good blog. I think it's smartbear.com. Just to give credit, I don't remember exactly what he said, but his point was there's business, there's a spouse or partner, there's kids, there's your health, and you can kind of do two of those really well at any given time. Like you could do two of them really, really well. And I remember reading that and thinking, well, that's not true. That's wrong. Like there's, I don't believe that. You got to give me at least three. Cause like, I got to have business and, and he made a point of saying that your relationship, your romantic partner, that is separate from your kids. So you don't just get to bundle family in. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized like he kind of makes a point. He makes a point and at any given time when I think about it, I think I'm really only being, we always have companies, right?
Right.
And so
Right.
business, I may not want to admit it, but that is what feeds everything else. So
Right.
at any given time, if I'm being honest, it's probably number one, right? Now,
Yeah.
if it stays number one constantly, that's a problem. And thankfully I've got a wife that will call me on that. But there's business. And then there's times when, my wife and we're focusing on us, we're going on trips, we're doing things just the two of us. And frankly, my mom's watching the kids. And so like that week, I'm probably not the best dad in the world because I'm not even there, but I am a good dad because I'm loving their mom. Right.
Yeah.
And then Emily and I will have conversations where it's like, yeah, I mean, this is, like last week and this week, it's crazy with kid stuff, school stuff. So we're not getting as much quote unquote quality time together, but we know that it's a season. And I think that that's important, is to be intentional about your seasons and to have seasons in life within the year.